everyone. Welcome to Sacred Stories. I am so glad to be recording. I've been without Wi-Fi for 3 days, and Will is my first conversation, and
Yay.
I'm so excited to dive in. So yeah, I'm going to invite us to step into sacred space in a slightly different way, and that is to sit with an idea that's been kind of marinating on my heart. That is the idea that in 2020, I feel that we've been called to reimagine reality, And today's conversation is very much about a process of reimagining and also like exploding paradigms that no longer serve us. And so my invitation for us in this moment is to bring into our hearts what sort of sacred reimagining has been calling to you lately? What has your heart been whispering or maybe shouting to step more fully into ways to connect more inward and embody lives that feel aligned and joyous and free and really in your own soul integrity? So we sit with that invitation today of reimagining reality.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, Will, it's so wonderful to have you with us. We were connected by the one and only Nessie Quarantello, who's introduced me to all sorts of wonderful folks.
Nice.
Kyla as well, who I interviewed a few
Oh,
weeks ago.
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, Nessie met Kyla through me. That's great.
Yes,
I love
yes.
the
It's all
circles.
one web of fabulousness.
That's great.
And I'm in Arizona right now. People can tell from the different background, and it's been kind of a tough time. It's been a trip that has not gone exactly the way I thought it would. And I was psyching myself up one day during this trip, watching reels of Oprah introducing various guests, and it was just making me smile so much. So I'm going to summon my inner Oprah and say, we are so excited to have with us today, Wil Fisher!
Am I supposed to come like charging down the aisles?
Like, yes. So Will, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us about all the amazing ways you help GBTQ men live lives of freedom and joy, and anything there.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, the introductory question. So yeah, my name is Wil Fisher. I live in San Diego, in sunny San Diego, a couple blocks from the beach. Feel super blessed to be here. I live near a big extended family that I'm really close with. And I just moved back here just a few years ago. So I spent a significant amount of time on the East Coast, where I was mostly involved with the nonprofit scene. And so I was supporting LGBTQ folks there. I was working with the Ali Frenay Center, which does housing for homeless queer youth. And then I started exploring personal growth work, eventually landed a gig supporting a personal growth retreat center for LGBTQ folks. And eventually they invited me to serve as their executive director. And so that's where my journey really began, as a person of support and in service of GBTQ men. Originally just by running this retreat center, but ultimately also offering workshops, programs, and coaching. And so that's my main gig, is coaching. I have a private practice called Willfully Living. And I also teach and facilitate GBTQ men's groups, and mostly around the themes of healing past wounds, moving past society's pressure to conform, and moving into greater freedom, greater queerness, both in context of gender and sexuality, but also queerness, meaning outside of the norm, meaning odd, individual. Greater playfulness. Playfulness is something I'm definitely a champion of, and greater freedom in general, and joy. You mentioned joy, so joy comes with all those things.
Oh, love it. And I had an experience. Gosh, it's a year ago now in Joshua Tree National Park. I was on a retreat, and what truth dropped in for me was play as sacred healing. like the ways that we can use play to reclaim parts of our childhood or past experiences that were really hard and do beautiful healing around that. So I love what you're saying.
100%. Yeah. And I'd say for men in particular, many of us men have been taught that playfulness is feminized, right? It's like it's girly to be silly. Men have an expectation to be stoic and still and serious. And so to embrace playfulness for men can be very, very healing. You see a lot of men, their only access to playfulness is playing with their kids or getting wasted with their frat brothers and, smacking each other on the ass, all drunk in the middle of the night. So to give folks, to give men a space where they can feel safe to play and to be creative and expressive, certainly can be sacred. Yeah.
Oh, love it. So that's actually like a beautiful opening for you to kind of share your sacred story and share a little bit about a story that's shaped your life and maybe continues to shape your life.
Yeah, thank you. So the sacred story I'm excited to share today is really about my journey with drag and with gender expression, gender identity. And it starts, I guess, in high school. So I mentioned I grew up in San Diego, but I was in a dysfunctional home. So I had two alcoholic parents and a drug addicted brother. And it was just very unsafe home environment and very chaotic. And then on top of that, I had this secret that I was gay. And so I wanted out. And fortunately, I found a way out. I ended up going to a boarding school for the arts in the mountains in Idlewild. So I was studying theater there, and I was with all these amazing creative individuals. And that's where I tried.
Like, I'm having this moment of like, oh my gosh, thank goodness that as a high schooler, like you had that as an escape during that time. Wow.
I mean, what a blessing. What a blessing.
Yeah.
And it was just very idyllic. We were in Idlewild, which is really close to Joshua Tree, just beautiful, beautiful nature everywhere. And yeah, it was a really special time. As a gay kid, it was the late 90s. And so there were still no other openly gay kids at the moment. But then I came out, and then people started like lining up. And I started the first gay straight alliance at the school. And found my tribe, found other sort of queer or questioning or gay students. And one day we went down to a thrift store and we bought all these sequin dresses. And so I have these photos of me because one of the photo students, came to the dorm room, and it was like me and like these 15-year-old, 14-year-old, 16-year-old boys playing in dresses, and this guy photographed it. And we have these beautiful like black and white photos of me and my first time in drag in this like flapper dress and this little like flapper wig.
Yeah.
So that's where my drag journey started. Fast forward to college.
Can I ask for a question? So
Yeah.
in that moment, can you remember what feelings were coming forth for you those first times that you were putting on the sequins and the wig and having an experience that was really affirming as opposed to like shaming?
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah. Drag for me brings out a different part of myself. It lets me embrace my femininity in a really whole and complete way, and it lets me be playful, but playful with gender. And so I do have memory of just feeling really fabulous and really beautiful, and feeling like a star. And it's actually, as you asked, I was like, oh, there was also the time when I was a little kid, when I was a boy, and my sisters, I have older sisters, and they were having a sleepover, and they did my makeup, as like putting makeup on the little brother. And similarly, I remember having this like, oh wow, I'm so pretty, this is so fun, I'm the star, as a little kid, but also part of me knowing like I'm not really supposed to like this, this is like a funny ha-ha thing,
Right.
but secretly really enjoying it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking too, just the intimacy of having someone touch your face, like make you
Mm-hmm.
feel beautiful. That just feels, yeah, it feels really powerful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I do drag, I usually do my own makeup, but when I have the privilege of like a makeup artist who is down to do it, it's a total self-care, like beautiful, like intimate, like getting a facial or massage. It's like
Right, right.
really beautiful act.
Yeah.
So yeah, then in college, I had another opportunity to drag. I had this boyfriend in New York City. I was going to school in Connecticut for theater, and he got me this wig, and then I sort of Sylvia became born. Sylvia London is my drag name, and I would kind of like shift the name depending on the look, like the theme. So there was like Sylvia Saddlestar was this like cowgirl, like space cowgirl. There's like my name would kind of shift depending on the looks. But this guy was just super supportive, and he would like dress in a complimentary outfit, and so it's just so supportive. And then we didn't stay together, but when I graduated college, we were friends still, and he had other friends who were into drag, and we created a drag troupe. And we were like this little troupe of mostly theater and musical theater students, and we called ourselves Snapdragon Productions. And we were this little troupe of drag queens, and we would all get ready together and go out. We were in our 20s in New York City, and we started to produce parties and promote parties. So we had our own little company. It's like guerrilla drag troupe.
I love that. Oh wow. And how did your relationship with drag evolve, during that time up until now, and what has it given you?
Yeah. Well, so during that time, it was like just such a freeing, beautiful expression and exploration and game, and we really felt like rock stars, and we felt like we owned the world. We had we had different parties that these bars were having us do, and we're just really living our best lives in New York City as this little drag troupe. And there was just so much sisterhood, and we had all these fun jokes and fun routines, and that felt really solid, and it felt like it was evolving. However, I didn't have a boyfriend at the time, and I was starting to feel like I missed that. And I sort of had this one incident in drag that where I fell asleep on the train on like one of the subway trains riding home from a drag gig at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And then I got to the end of the train, and the clubs close at like 4 a.m. So like by the time I got to the end of the train and woke up, there were pedestrians getting on the train to go to work, and I'm in like full punk rock, like slutty drag. And so that moment was this moment of like, what have I done? Like I've taken this too far. Like it was a moment of shame. I felt a lot of shame around that, and was kind of taking a break from drag, and found a boyfriend. As I said, I was kind of missing a boyfriend, and this lovely Jewish guy, and incidentally we met at a Christmas party, but we like fell in love. We were like quick to fall in love, and just like connected and spent a lot of time together. But I came to find out that he wasn't comfortable with drag, and he had some real harsh judgments about folks who did drag.
Yeah.
And so it was like that.
Do you know like what it was triggering in him that was
Internalized homophobia?
I was gonna say, okay.
Yeah. So like that fear that gay people are really flamboyant and feminine. He didn't identify in that way. He liked being a more masculine, traditionally masculine man.
Yeah.
And so it freaked him out. And then the other thing that freaked him out is he would see me with him, and I would be a certain way. And this is part of my my human design, is that I am very much a chameleon. So I am a different person when I'm with different people, for better or for worse, you know. So he would see me with him, and I would be very much, you know, grounded and, you know, intellectual. And then he'd see me with my drag queen friends, and I would be like flamboyant and fun and playful and free and fabulous. And so there was this disconnect for him that threw him off. And it was like, who are you? Which one of these is you?
Right.
And so it put me in an awkward position where I actually felt like I had to choose drag or him.
Yeah.
And at the time I chose him.
Yeah. And then you were shutting down part of yourself. I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, I bring up this quote probably almost every Sacred Stories. Walt Whitman said, "We contain multitudes." And, you know, we all have these different sides in us. And to feel like one part has to be shut down in order to receive love, you know, like, yeah, really hard, really hard. And I'm just thinking too, I mean, I've always loved dressing up, and I have this lavender wig that, like, a different side of Jessica comes out when I wear it, you know. It's
Amazing.
really fun. And I'm sure many of our listeners have had these moments where, like, we can bring out a different side of ourselves and step into something, yeah, that feels really empowering or really playful or naughty or, you know, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I see drag as a tool, you know, as a medicine for self-exploration. It's something that helps invoke different energies, and to deny ourselves that possibility is unnecessary. You know, folks deny it because it feels taboo. It feels like they'd be judged for it. And it's been such a pleasure. So when I was at the retreat center, we had this big drag closet. It was like the size, it was like a room. It was like a bedroom essentially, but all gowns and wigs, and you know, all the retreatants they'd come with their, you know, their great aunt's like most fabulous dress that she was getting rid of or what. So we just had this amazing collection, and we'd organize it, and it'd always end up a big mess by the end of the weekend. But anyways, so folks would come, and some of these men, actually, I remember our Neharim group, I was telling you about the queer Jewish group. They're these like guys in their 60s and 70s, and they've never in their lives considered putting on a dress.
Yeah.
And then they step into that drag closet, and it was my favorite thing. I mean, I was the executive director at a lot of roles. Yeah. My favorite thing that I got to do was dress men up in drag. And I found this sort of like magic in that room where I would kind of like connect with them and see what their comfort level is. And then I'd kind of just be drawn to a certain object, maybe a boa or something small, but I would just kind of like bring it into their periphery and maybe throw it around their neck, and then slowly like see their comfort level grow. And then by the end of the weekend, they're like in a full look, like performing at the talent show, like completely expressing this part of themselves that they never knew existed.
Yes, I can feel the freedom in it as you're speaking, and the magic too. I just envision you as this like fairy godmother coming in with these outfits, and you're wanted like poof, and like sparkles everywhere, you know, as they, yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, very much that.
So
yeah.
Powerful. Yeah. All right. And nowadays, are you continuing to like play there, and how has it evolved? And
yeah, so sort of circling back to when I essentially put Sylvia London in the closet, you know, in order to be with this man.
Yeah.
And and I was okay with it, and mostly because I was in love, and I kind of, it was out of sight, out of mind. And meanwhile, we had that drag troupe, and I was really pushing that forward, and so it kind of like fizzled out.
Yeah.
And then I started to miss it, and then I started to realize like this was a part of me, and people would ask me about it, and I like felt kind of embarrassed and shy around it. And I started to realize that I'm denying a part of myself,
Yeah.
and that I'm not fully expressed. And we ended up breaking up. It was in part because of that, other things as well. And I just spoke with him the other day. Actually, we're still really close, and he's since really dealt with his internalized homophobia, and he's super supportive of drag. But we broke up, and then I found my way back into drag and started, doing gigs in the city, and had a drag mother who I do gigs with, and started expressing that part of myself again. And this time I started expressing it in new ways. So I think I've mentioned the Radical Fairies to you, but they're this group of kind of a queer spiritual group, very earth-based, sort of pagan roots, a lot of ritual and a lot of nature. So a lot of like gathering in the woods and celebrating our queerness together. And so I connected with them and learned of like new ways of drag, like drag that was less about switching genders, still that, but then new elements to it. So like bringing like natural objects, bringing like animal, creature kind of energy. And so then I started to really explore like, wow, drag isn't just about me getting in touch with my feminine side. It's about me getting in touch with my animal side, with my like alien side, with my like sometimes my more masculine side, right? Drag is really not just about cross-dressing. It's about any article of clothing that we put on that brings out a new part of ourselves that isn't really there on the day-to-day.
Yeah. Wow. Was it also a portal to you for your own spirituality, or did it not feel that way as much?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's because the from a spiritual standpoint, it's connecting to something divine, connecting to something larger than our human experience,
Mhm.
and really like channeling that, right? It's like when I would, so we'd have these gatherings, and it was like I'd be in my tent like putting these things on, like adorning myself, and just like starting to feel that energy that these things are bringing into my field, and then going out to the fire wherever it's drumming, and being with my other phase also in these looks, and just kind of surrendering into the energy of it, which was like, yeah, cosmic, like totally like connected to the earth, connected to the cosmos, connecting to each other, connected to the fire, just like this new sacred self emerging.
Oh, I love that. And I'm I'm connecting with creation, truly, like the
Mm.
fire and the earth and the rocks, and yeah, that when
Mhm.
those elements get brought in, then it does feel cosmic. Oh,
Mhm.
wow. Wow. Um, I want to talk a little bit about Two-Spirit, but before that, I
Mm.
don't want to forget to ask you, how did you come up with your name, Sylvia London?
Oh, that's a good question. So Sylvia, I came up with from some sort of significant night where I ended up very early in the morning playing a video game that had a character named Sylvia who has a long braided ponytail, and she would whip it around and hit her opponent with it. And I was just really into it.
Really fun. Yeah.
So that's where I got Sylvia. I can't for the life of me remember when or where or how I decided my last name was London, but it works. So I don't know.
Does work. It reminds me of Carmen Sandiego a little bit, like having the last name that's the name of a city is kind of spectacular.
Totally.
So much.
Totally. Thanks.
Wow.
Yeah, it classes her up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So when you and I were talking before we hit record, you started to share a little bit about your relationship with drag and gender, and how showing up as Two-Spirit, gender non-binary or gender non-conforming kind of fit into that. Can you share a little bit more there?
Yeah, certainly. And, I'm still finding my identity there. I definitely know I'm non-binary. I know I'm queer is kind of the easiest term because that's just anything outside of cis male and hetero. And I love Two-Spirit as an identity, but I'm part Native American, but I'm not a full Native American, and I haven't done all my research yet. So I'm leaning towards Two-Spirit, but I also have some work to do to feel integrous in claiming that.
Yeah.
But what I like about Two-Spirit is that rather than they pronouns, I like he or she. Like I like playing in the binary sometimes. I like messing with the binary too, but I like really fully embodying a man, and I like fully embodying a woman, and I like to have the option to be in either space. So that's where I do like the idea of claiming Two-Spirit in the future. But yeah, I guess it's important to me to recognize that I'm not cis because in that story around like reclaiming my drag again, is like I wasn't embodying that part of myself. I wasn't expressing and playing and being with that part of myself. And so claiming that helps me remember that I am something besides cis. And so how can I experience that? How can I express that? And sometimes that looks like just, wearing a dress, like as a boy, like looking like a boy, but in a dress, when I was living in New York City, it was a lot easier to go out on the town in heels. In San Diego, it feels a little bit more risky, but I find opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I'm thinking too, I haven't shared a ton about my own journey and coming out. I will say that like one of the things that I love so much about being with women, I mean, there are a lot of things I love, but one is the ways that we can like F with identity and with gender roles, and the ways that it gets tossed back and forth and thrown out the window and everything in between. It's really, it just feels so freeing and fun.
Yes.
And radical,
Yes.
So yeah, I love that. It's interesting. Well, when I was prepping for today, I looked more into some of the Jewish traditions around gender and exploding gender paradigms, and there's actually a lot when you dig in.
Cool.
So what's called midrash are like stories about stories in the Torah, and the midrash understands the original creation of humans, the first man Adam, to be both male and female. And the Hebrew word for rib, right? Usually it was said like Eve was created out of Adam's rib, is also a word for side. So this idea that the divine creates both male and female and then splits them down the middle, like it's not like one coming from the other. There's this other passage in the Talmud, so this is now rabbinic commentary, that says that Abraham and Sarah were, the Hebrew word is tumtumim, which means of indeterminate sex, and later became male and female respectively. And then there's a Kabbalistic work, so this is now Jewish mysticism, that like all these ways when both masculine and feminine imagery are used for the same person. So there's this teaching that sometimes a male soul winds up in a female body and vice versa. And Isaac, one of our patriarchs, is seen as having transitioned from female to male in Kabbalah. So there's just all this like, we think, well, because interpretations have been a very certain way, we kind of assume that's how it is, and it's not the case. So it's cool to hear you talk about drag, and also other forms of spirituality as like making sacred space for this, but to also know that it is in more traditional settings too.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know what the. I'm curious. What is the Jewish take on past lives? Is there space for that, or?
So, like most things in Judaism, there's a bazillion different answers on past lives. There's not like one take.
Okay.
For sure, the idea of reincarnation is present in ancient literature, and
Mm-hmm.
there isn't like a uniform view on death. I mean, there is much more emphasis put on this lifetime, and
Mm-hmm.
more of an emphasis put on deeds as opposed to like energy, which is why I think
Mm-hmm.
I find myself gravitating, like expanding my own kind of spiritual toolkit to include energetic
Sure.
practices too, because I connect so much that way. Um,
Mm.
but there are like, it's totally kosher to be a practicing Jew and believe in reincarnation, and I
Cool.
certainly do. Um,
Cool.
so yeah, there's not a ton. I mean, I'd have to look into this, like if you find it more in certain texts.
Mm.
Um, it's not as emphasized now in modernity, but
Yeah.
it's in there. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I bring it up because I also find that it's my belief that yes, in past lives we've probably been both sexes, and so it's also an experiment in connecting to our soul past. You know, like who we were before. I've never every person I've seen, even like straight men who have gone there, who've put on heels, they just there's something that lights up. It's like something that it's like this light bulb, internal light bulb that has been there their whole lives that suddenly gets like turned on, and I feel like there's a reason that we all want to ultimately express both our sacred feminine and our sacred masculine. And
Yeah.
so drag is one of those tools to help folks do that.
And it just reminds me as I'm listening to you, like it's a sacred remembering. Like
Mm,
when those men like, put on clothes that are traditionally, more feminine, like,
mm,
oh, it's like, oh, this part of me. Yeah, it's
mm.
funny. Every time I have a psychic reading, all the past lives that are mentioned, I'm always a man.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and it's powerful. Yeah,
Mm-hmm,
powerful.
mm-hmm.
How like in your work now helping GBTQ men, um has drag come into play? How do you use it? How does it show up? How do you empower other men in that, like using kind of the magic of drag?
Yeah, so it's a little tricky because most of my clients right now that I'm working with, I work with through Zoom, and they don't necessarily have a drag closet for me to adorn them with. Um, but certainly it's something I bring into my practice, and I do it in different ways. So there's like an animal totem workshop that I do, and I invite men who know their animal totem or who have some sense of what it is to bring in something that will help them connect. So maybe it's a feather, or maybe it's and so that is almost a piece of drag too, when I'm defining it as an article that we adorn ourselves with that brings out this new energy.
Can you
So stuff like that, like
can you
finding little things that kind of bring out the energy. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
I
were you
love
saying?
that. So for those who are not familiar with what it means to have an animal totem, can you tell us what that means and then how we might be able to uncover that for ourselves if we're curious to learn more?
Oh, cool. Okay. Wow. So there's different ways to uncover it for yourself. I guess start by talking about what it is.
Yeah.
So an animal totem is essentially a guide. It's a symbol in the form of an animal that can support us on our journeys, and it can help us connect with sacred energy, with wisdom, and it can help us tap into energies that are going to support us in our dharma. And oftentimes what that looks like is when we connect to a particular totem, they kind of just show up, maybe in a dream, and they'll show up at like very important times, that will just kind of give us a nod, like, yes, this is it, or no, get away from that. And it's funny, I've been working with different totems, but I had a very significant dream just last night of a white horse. And I feel like I'm moving into this white horse totem, because your totems can evolve and can change, and you can have more than one. So to this afternoon, I was looking up the symbology. I have like multiple animal wisdom books, and I was looking up the symbology, and a lot of it is around freedom. And I'm about to offer this course in freedom, and a lot of it is about like embracing your freedom. And then it was white, and I was like, it was a white horse. It was definitely white, and I had this like deck that fell off like the table randomly, and I pulled up the deck, and I was like, oh, I wonder which card I'm going to see. I pull up the deck, and the top card was this beautiful unicorn, like white unicorn. And it was all about creative expression. And I was like, oh my God, this is like what I'm about to offer to the world. So that is a good example of like finding these totems that give us kind of guidance and help us know what energy and what movement we need to move forward on. And so to answer the second part of the question, there are meditations you can use to find your totem animal. Often it looks like, going into a forest or going into a field and then creating the space for yourself to be open to what animal shows up in the sky or in the grass or coming out of the forest. And I have a recorded meditation I can offer folks about that. And then also just paying attention to your dreams, like to being out in nature and seeing like, for some reason, like I keep seeing eagles or whatever it is. And then once you do start a relationship with a totem animal, the work is to read up on its symbology, but also just read up on the animal, like study it, like observe it in nature, watch documentaries on it, like get to know it and connect. And then by developing that relationship, you'll get more guidance, more knowledge, more awareness.
Yeah, I love this. Thank you. It's one of my favorite ways to play with divine winks too. Like,
yes, divine winks.
Animal that like keeps coming up again and again. I pay attention to that. So, I've had so many different animals that have come through for me, but also just animals that we really connect with. Like, I love deer, and I'll often see deer when I'm hiking. And so I just use like any moment that I see a deer as like a sign of spirit saying, I got you, like I'm here. I had a really powerful experience on a hike yesterday. So as I mentioned, I'm in Arizona. This trip has been nothing like I thought it would, just like a lot of growth opportunities, we'll put it gently. So I'm hiking kind of a desolate mountain, and I come across a dead snake. And snakes are symbols of transformation, the shedding of the skin, new things. And the snake had been killed by a wild animal, and it was completely dismembered. So there were like parts of the snake like on the trail as I was going. It was gruesome. And I just started, I was a little freaked out, but I also was laughing because it was so perfectly symbolic of what I feel like I'm in right now, which is this radical transformation, but it hasn't been a gentle transformation. It's been a like feeling like I'm in the washing machine a little bit, or being dismembered by a coyote or whatever it was that got to the snake. So it actually it was a beautiful moment because it created such a clear picture of what I've been feeling. And so there are ways that we can use, encounters with animals, whether it's in our dreams or when we're on a walk or when we're pulling cards or whatever it is, as a way to like tap into some inner knowing, but also get some support from the animal world. It's really powerful.
Yes, I love that, because you do hear about run-ins with snakes as this transformational thing, and oftentimes what that looks like is you see like a snake skin, right, that's been unfolded, and it's like, oh, the transformation's unfolding. But yours was a dismembered state, rather than just like the surrender to the beautiful natural unfolding. It was like the chaos of disembowelment. And what I like about what you're saying too is it's this moment of understanding. It's like, oh, it's like almost being seen, it's like almost like sacred seeing us, like, oh, they see what I'm going through.
Yeah, it felt really affirming, even though it was
Mm,
slightly morbid.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. Um, I want to touch on kind of one other thing as we start to bring this container to a close, and that is something you shared with me before we started recording about GBTQ men and their kind of unique struggles. And you talked about this idea of constantly seeking real validation, but not
Mm,
knowing what that truly looks like.
mm,
Um, and I've been thinking a lot about this year and the ways that I'm being called to reimagine reality, being being called to um, walk my talk and really like
mm,
own what like how I want to be in the world. For me, that's a lot about radical simplicity and the ways that
mm,
even though I say that I want this, I'm not always following through. Um,
mm,
yeah, I'd love to hear you kind of riff on this a little bit about real validation, how we
mm,
can dance with that, knowing what that truly looks like. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, thanks. That what you're stepping into really resonates with me as well. Walking my talk and following through on the life that I'm envisioning for
Yeah.
myself. It's a process, and it feels like this is a very crucial time to step it up.
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of, I call it authentic validation. The idea there is that as gay men, GBTQ men, um, many of us grew up having this shameful secret, having this thing that we knew about ourselves, and being afraid that the world would discover it. And so we masked it with other behaviors. And sometimes that would look like masking it with accomplishments. So, like, being the star football player or getting the good grades, and we'd get this validation that was actually inauthentic validation, because we were getting validation for a persona that we were creating that wasn't actually us.
Yeah.
And then we move into adulthood, and many GBTQ men continue feeling this void of getting authentic validation, and so seeking validation, but ultimately getting more inauthentic validation, like getting validated for having the hottest car or the new Gucci loafers, or when we see this with many gay men's preoccupation with everything being perfect and being the best.
Yeah.
And there's beauty and magic to that too. So it's not to judge it, but sometimes it's off balance. And so GBTQ men can sometimes fall into this trap of looking for validation, but ultimately seeking and receiving inauthentic validation instead of the authentic validation that the soul is truly craving. And so, circling back to what you said of like really stepping into who you are, and that's the path. I'm really in a crux place with that too. That's the hack, is to find healing in past wounds so that we can move into our most authentic self. And when we're expressing our most authentic self, then any validation and anytime we're being seen, we are fulfilling that void of inauthentic validation. We're suddenly being validated for who we truly are.
I love that. Um, how do you have any like invitations for ways that folks can, because certainly this is present in the GBTQ, demographic, but also present for like every human and all the ways that we get inauthentically validated. What are
Yeah.
some practices that you love that we can start to play with to kind of step more into authentic validation and fill some of these voids?
Hmm. Good question. So a lot of it is practicing with authenticity in general. And, I think that often starts with meditation and mindfulness. So really stripping ourselves of our behaviors, of our default ways of being, challenging and questioning those a bit, and getting quiet and still through meditation or whatever mindfulness practice necessary, so that then we can move from this foundation of authenticity. And when we're moving from a foundation of authenticity, then often or inevitably we start to receive validation that is validating our authentic selves, even if that's just someone seeing us, really seeing who we are.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, truly being seen, I don't think there's anything more powerful. I know for myself, like it turns me inside out every single time, I have an encounter that's like that. Yeah.
Mm,
And I'm just struck, by this thread in all of these sacred stories of getting quiet. Um,
mm.
and for me, the getting quiet enables our own soul wisdom to come through, which is like that base note of deep authenticity. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess the other major healing thing for me too has been to find spaces that are safe to express authentically. For me, that's actually been a lot of men's work recently. Go figure. And it's connecting with other conscious men who are expressing and sharing from vulnerability, and creating that safety, so we can rewire our brain to recognize that I am safe in my vulnerability. I can be seen, and it's a healing process. I'm not going to roll over and die. I'm actually going to heal and become more of myself.
Yeah. 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 And I think, one of the beautiful things about this age that we're in is that if you don't feel like you have that where you are, there's so many online communities that are doing
Totally.
sacred work like this, like yours, my offerings as well. So yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for teasing that apart a little bit more. I didn't want to close without diving in.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you.
I know folks are going to be excited to connect with you and your offerings. Can you share like how to find you, what you're excited about that you have going on right now, all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm really excited about a program I'm going to launch in early 2021, with the themes of stepping more into our freedom, stepping more into our queerness, which I explained is sort of anything outside of conformity, right? Stepping outside of society's pressure to conform, stepping into more playfulness, and stepping more into self-expression. So that's the theme of the program I'm launching. And I'm going to have a free online version of it mid-January. And folks can find me on Facebook. They can look up Willfully Living is the name of my company. My website is willfully, but spelled with one L, because that's how you spell my name. So it's WIL dash fully living. So it's a little play on my name. And so I'll have info on there too.
Oh, thank you, Will. So many juicy offerings and, like connecting to practices of play and being playful with gender and just playful with how we express in the world is so deeply healing, because as young people and even just as adults in this society that is like very clear about what's okay and what isn't, it gives us a chance to undo some of those cords that have been strangling us, keeping
It's
our
hard.
soul from its full expression. So this is like such friggin' sacred work. Thank you for all that you're doing.
It's my honor and pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. It was such a treat to be in conversation today. Really, really excited to hear how this lands with folks. And I'm just gonna leave us with a blessing and an invitation to take some quiet time to think about what is our medicine for self exploration. what is our medicine for self-exploration? Is it having a really fun closet to dress up and to explore different sides of ourselves? Is it connecting with totem animals? Is it finding sacred community where we feel like we can be so fully seen? To really take some time to step back and think about what are the ways I feel the most fully self expressed, and think about how we can commit to deeper and deeper ways of honoring that in the new year. So, thank you for all this beautiful food for thought,
Mhm.
as we kind of dive into all the ways that we can. Oh, that we can explode the paradigms that are no longer serving us. There's nothing that makes me more excited than that. So,
Yeah, it's so good.
so
Yeah, it was such a pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, thanks, Will.